Hello and welcome to our show, The Awakening, on WGSN-DB, the Going Solo Network. I am Tina Huggins, your divorce coach specialist and restorative mediator, and this is Joe Huggins. Hello.
Hello.
So, our topic today, sorry about that. Our topic today, we were having fun just before we put this on, practicing and everything, right? So, types of narcissistic abuse is our topic tonight. Types of narcissistic abuse. Really what that's going to work into is types of abuse, because we're using the term narcissist more like the lay people use the term, and we're going to talk about that as we move through here. I've got a lot of reading to do today so I can give you informed information, but most of this does come from Google, not from a medical background. So this is just Google's understanding of these terms, not from a medical background. So this is what Google has to say about narcissistic abuse syndrome. So, and this is a syndrome that you, as the abused, would go through. So narcissistic abuse syndrome is a non-medical term for feeling of anxiety, avoidance, and fear due to emotional abuse from someone with narcissistic personality disorder, also called NPD. And this is what Google has to say about NPD, narcissistic personality disorder. A disorder in which a person has an inflated sense of self-importance. Narcissistic personality disorder is found more commonly in men, but there are women who are also NPD. And Joe is sitting here as proof of that. He's been through narcissistic abuse syndrome himself. The treatment, which is talk therapy, can help, but this condition cannot be cured. So there are some of us that would be considered to have narcissistic traits. And I can say, in studying all of this, at times in my life, I have had narcissistic traits. And we're now discovering lots of information on how that's related to different other family events and things that happened with different people. And so in order to be classified a narcissist, you need to have a medical diagnosis. So us lay people calling our exes or soon-to-be exes or our spouses narcissists is just a lay term that we are using to label, kind of like an umbrella over mental disorders, actually. And the medical diagnosis that's needed, they need to go in and be tested so that they can actually prove. And there's lots of things that they do to prove that, but most of the time it's going through questionnaires. And we're going to talk about such questionnaires in a little while. This is a chronic condition, and it can last for years, or in the case, it actually is a lifelong situation. Some people are born with the traits and they just worsen with age, and other people they develop. And in reading through and going through some information from Bill Eddy, he writes books on mediation and mediation with narcissistic individuals or toxic individuals. And he talks often about the blood flow from the left brain to the right brain, and how a narcissist person is, if they're born with that, or if something traumatic happens in their life and they get stuck in this situation, that it forces their brain to work differently than ours. And the blood flow that goes back and forth is different in their brains than it is in mine, or yours, I should say, yours and mine, and lay people's brains. And then it goes on to talk about a narcissistic personality disorder. It says a mental health condition in which people have an unreasonably high sense of their own importance. They need and speak too much attention and want people to admire them. People with this disorder may lack the ability to understand or care about the feelings of others. They have no empathy. And they feed on those of us who do have empathy, especially if we have lots of empathy. The symptoms include excessive need for admiration, disregard for others' feelings, and inability to handle any criticism. They can't take it. And a sense of entitlement. And then Google goes on to say that there are 4 stages of narcissistic abuse syndrome, or of the narcissistic abuse cycle. Okay. And these are idolization. So early on in a relationship, and they call it love bombing, but early on in a relationship, they really treat you like you're special, you're somebody important, and they want to be with you, and they make you feel special. And in the case with one of the guys that I dated, that was definitely the love bomb and how that worked through. And then they devaluation. They devalue you. They talk you down. They say things that you're unattractive, you're fat, you're dumb. Okay. They devalue you. Then they have repetition. They go through that, repeating things over and over and over. So they basically, this is where the gaslighting part comes in. They get you to believing that you're fat, you're ugly, you're unintelligent. And then they discard you. And this actual situation can go on, this cycle can go on through a relationship several times. They discard you, throw away, don't talk to you for days, maybe even, and then they love bomb you, and it starts all over again. In the cycle, a narcissist partner may love bomb you, devalue your sense or self over a time period, repeat the pattern, and eventually discard you or discard the whole relationship in general. So we go through that, and then we're going to talk about the types of abuse. So while I'm reading that, what was going through your head?
Well, everything's a test with a narcissist. That's what went through my mind. They're going to test you on this, test you on that, and you won't even know it till later when they hold it against you and blow it completely out of the water. And it's like, really? You're just kind of side blinded.
Yeah, you lived through that longer. I mean, and we'll talk about this in other shows, but I dealt with situational abuse. And the word situational just basically means something caused something to happen. Excuse me. And when we go through that, so that was in my marriage, that my marriage, although became toxic and violent, because you've heard me talk in previous shows that I ended up with a broken hand and separated ribs and things like that. Mine was actually situational. I didn't live through all of that. He fits on a narcissistic spectrum. And in future shows, we'll hopefully get to interview the creator of that spectrum. And we go through and we talked, you and I have talked about all the abuse that you've gone through. And so as I go and I start to label abuse, we'll just kind of stop and kind of talk about how we've dealt with that. My learning about narcissism came probably a year or 2 years before I actually met you. And so I started studying narcissism then, because somebody called me a narcissist, and I'm like, oh my gosh, if there's something wrong with me, I want to fix it, which is not characteristic of a narcissist. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and talk about types of abuse. So we all understand physical abuse, and actually there's a part where we talk about physical abuse. I ended up with physical abuse, but my relationship technically wasn't a domestic violence situation, although the abuse ended up domestic and it was violent. But when they classified these, and when I was doing the research, I was kind of interested that they didn't put them together.
Right.
So understanding physical is a body, and abuse would be smacking somebody around. Okay. That's what we understand is physical abuse, right? So I know that you had some situations in your relationship that were like that. So can you tell our audience about that?
Okay, so I think I had the police called on me at least 3 times, could be 4 times. Because she accused me of abusing her. And and that wasn't the case. I did not abuse her. Um, she ended up one time punching me, scratching me, biting through my shirt, on my back, reaching over and just clamping on. And that was one time she actually got arrested. And so I didn't mean for her to be arrested. I was new at the game. And I went in the next day and I thought, man, I felt like I needed protection against her. So I took my shirt in for evidence. And so they interrogated me and all that stuff. And then they realized I was telling the truth. And they said, well, we're going to arrest her. And I said, I don't want her arrested. And they said, well, it's out of your hands. This is what happens. And at that time, I actually fell apart. That was tough because I didn't want this big explosion. And that's what happened. They they got me an advocate on the spot at the police station. I don't know if they had one ready or if it's coincidental, but it was pretty amazing how they just instantly great advocate lady. So she helped out a lot. So they went and arrested her, and I was actually able to go back into the house without her there because then they put the restriction on her, no contact and all that stuff. And so that's one time.
Yeah, and I have told you and our audience that I've been in domestic violence situations, a physical thing where I didn't like being yelled at. I didn't like the yelling, even though I would elevate my voice, it would be in hopes that it would stop that. And in doing my therapy, I have found that because my dad would raise his voice, my dad wasn't violent, but he would raise his voice, which was violent enough. And I think you've talked about your dad too. And because of that, I always had this fear. I would lock myself in the closet when my mom would yell and scream. I think it was probably even worse with my mom. But I remember my dad yelling all the time. We couldn't do anything right, it seemed. So he would yell at my brother and I, and we would go through, like I said, I would hide in the closet. Well, that connected to me in such a way that into my marriage, when he started getting to a point that he was raising his voice at me, I just wanted to get away. So I would leave. I would leave and go drive. I lived in Southern Colorado at the time. And so we had lots of open space to go and drive in. And so I would usually drive up a pass called La Vida Pass, just drive all the way up to the top. Would take me, probably about an hour to get up to the top. And then I would turn around and come back. By the time I'd get home, I would be calm and I'd be able to handle the situation. And we could talk. Most of the time we didn't. The fight was over and we just carried on, never fixing anything. But my domestic violence would happen when I would go to leave, when I would finally go to leave the fight, not the relationship. That's when I ended up with a broken hand and the separated ribs. It ended up, if I remember the fight right, and this is one fight, we ended up outside and I think I punched him in the face. I'm not even sure. But anyways, I ended up underneath a pickup truck trying to kick him away from me to keep him from grabbing me anymore. And because of that, and I had to warn Joe when we first got to Dayton, don't go to grab my hand. Do not go to grab my wrist or anything like that, because I have a bit of PTSD and
Right.
I lose it.
Right.
I lose
And
it.
all the 6 years that I've known you, I've never grabbed your wrist.
This is a really good thing.
I'll hold her hand. That's as far up as I go.
So the next one that we have is sexual abuse. And I can speak on this one. I don't know how it is for you, but we women tend to control the sexual aspect of our relationship, right? Well, at one point, and this was situational, something I said to him caused this situational thing, not something I said that night, but something I had said. He got so rough with me, and not so much just the sex rough, but the forcing me down, forcing me to have sex with him. I was crying. He saw me crying. He was there on top, his face not too far from mine, and he didn't care. So I ended up with sexual abuse in my relationship. And with men, it's different. So
I never experienced anything like that.
so you guys will experience, you can't have any.
Okay.
That's
That-
how the woman sexually abuses a man. They
Right.
cut you off from that.
Right.
And I actually have a friend that wife did that to him.
Okay. Well, that definitely happened, and probably happens in every marriage would be my guess. I don't know, but we're not talking about everybody else's. But yeah, there's a lot of times for that. Yep.
So I know in my marriage, I never cut him off. I may not have wanted sex for a night or two, but I never cut him off. So we had a healthy sexual relationship up until the problems started happening here. And so in your relationship, when she would cut you off, how long did you go?
I think it went up as far as 9 months. You lose track, but it is a long time. Yeah.
And because I've talked with you, I've talked with lots of men, that once that happens, they start looking outside the relationship and knowing you and talking about that.
Right.
Did you start to look outside your relationship?
I wouldn't say look. I never entertained. Okay. That's a tough one. I never went outside my relationship. Ever. I had, because I'm in people's houses all the time measuring that kind of stuff. And there's multiple times that, yeah, I had a chance, but actually I didn't even get back with her on the estimate. I just left and hit the road,
Yeah.
So things go through your mind when you have a bad relationship, and you kind of let your mind wander, like, I wonder what it'd be like with that person, to be with that person. So in that way, yeah, but to actually physically do it, no.
Okay. And I've lived with you long enough that I know that that's a truth from you.
Yeah.
Okay. And then we have psychological and emotional abuse. And I think it really doesn't matter whether they're physically abusing you or not. If they're physically abusing you, you're also being abused emotionally, psychologically.
Sure.
So there's a point, and so here, when I was researching this, and I did this in Google, I didn't do it in a medical thing this time. So they didn't separate emotional and psychological, but there is emotional abuse, and it will eventually become psychological. So the psychological stuff is when it goes on long enough that now they've gaslit you to believing you're fat, you're ugly, and you're not smart enough to go through things. And so that's when the emotional becomes a psychological. So what took place with you in there?
Yeah, it's psychological for sure. And it's a game to them, but it's real life game for them. They're living it. They're into it. That's their reality. Yeah. So, and it takes way too much brain effort if someone healthy wanted to go and think that way. It would just tax you. I'm sure it taxes them, but that's their life. They live it. That's all they know.
It's the way their brain thinks.
Right.
So we're going to take a quick break for our sponsors. So just hold on, and you'll join us in just a few minutes. And welcome back. So we're now into talking about financial and material abuse.
Mhm.
So I know that you dealt with a ton of financial abuse.
Right. Oh, yeah.
So go ahead and tell our listeners.
Well, it's a lot. When I finally started going through my divorce, I did find where she had $127,000, not with my name on it, her name only. So I asked her about it, and she said that you knew about that. And I'm like, there's no way I knew about that. That's a lot of money. So that was one of them. And then she had another $120,000 tucked away in another thing. And I was actually, and she wrote the cashier check to herself. She didn't cash the check, and they go bad after 6 months. They go stale. So I went back to the bank and I had them write 2 checks. I think that's how I had it done. And because you could reissue a cashier's check.
Mhm.
And so, but instead of putting it in the bank, I took it to my lawyer and then gave it to him. He made it known to the courts that I now had this money. And we ended up, the lawyer is really happy about that.
Yeah, then you
'Cause-
get financially abused by
yeah,
a lawyer.
So yeah, then we ended up
Let's see
burning
how we
burning
can
all that money.
Burn through this money. Yeah,
Both of us.
maybe don't do that.
Yeah, maybe don't do that. If you got it in your hand, maybe just use it for leverage,
Yeah, I would never tell you to take and spend that money because it's marital money and it belongs to the two of you. So I would never tell you to do that. But if the spouse is taking money from you, pulling it aside, you did the right thing by giving it to the attorney, but then just like we saw, you
Right.
got financially abused by the attorney
Right.
because it was there. Let's just spend it.
Well, and I was told by my lawyer, Joe, you'll get yours in permanent orders. Well, you'll get yours, all right. All she had to do is say personal expense. I used the 127,000 on personal expense.
She spent
And
a
my
lot of time researching that.
oh yeah, she researched it. So my lawyer didn't protest against that at all, and they just went on. Oh, personal expense, 127,000. So I never did get mine. So I thought I would, but
So the next one is modern slavery. And I didn't deal with that, although I do know I have associates that I've worked with that have been the slave to their spouse. And this happens, a lot of times we'll hear about it where there's such things as mail order brides. And this was a deal in the little itty bitty town I came from, where somebody put out this mail order bride catalog, so to speak, and people would order these brides and they would get them, and yes, they would marry them, but they would be slaves. They would have to cook, clean, and provide sex as they were told to do. And so it's not something we see very often, and none of us will know that it's going on because they're so afraid of their captor, their spouse, killing them, their family, their children. They're so afraid that you'll never know this is going on. So it's a very difficult thing to notice. And although you were forced to work so that she had money to stash.
There's similarities there, yeah. You can wait on them hand and foot and you still can't make them happy. So, and I did that. I tried everything.
Yeah, you can't please them. There's absolutely nothing you can do to please them.
They're miserable.
So there's different types. There's all kinds of different types here. Discriminatory abuse. So I have known couples where they have an interracial marriage, and although this is from a narcissistic person. So they're of color and they marry somebody, say, white. And in the cases that I know, it was kind of, I think, the other way around. And they would cut down their spouse for being a different color than them. And they would say that race is not as smart as their race. So these types of things happen quite frequently. And it's interesting to me. I mean, you've talked about how your ex would tell you how dumb you were, and that because your family was dumb and they were dumpy and
no education. You didn't go to college. Your parents didn't go to college. Titles are so important, and they'll rub them in your face whether they're true or not.
yeah, and I laugh at that one because I'm sorry, you married them knowing who and what they were. So that's on you. No, I always just think that but that happens. That happens. They marry you and then they cut you down. That's
There's a lot of cut downs.
parts of the narcissistic.
Whether you're black or white, they're gonna find something, a lot of things, not just something, but.
And here's one that you went through that as I was researching that, I'm like, okay, how does this fit in? But yet it does. So organizational or institutional abuse, okay? The abuse to an organization or institution, but she abused you by wanting to take large chunks of money and give to a church.
Right. When we had 6 young kids and I'm busting my butt trying to make a living, and she goes to her hometown in this tiny little town in South Dakota and gives like 5 or 6 grand in one lump sum, boom, just to make herself look really, really good. And here we have 6 little kids. I'm the only one making a living. I should have been a part of that.
So this is another one here: neglect or acts of omission. So neglecting you by, I have a situation with a client where they're looking at their spouse has threatened to sue them if they pursue divorce, and to sue them because they neglected their spouse affection. They held back affection. So there is laws in some states where you can do that, where that is actually a thing. Now, whether you can actually follow suit with that, just because there's a law doesn't necessarily mean the courts are going to allow something like that to happen. But there are laws in some states where you can do that. And there's a book called A Child Called It. And if you can't handle, even my voice breaks when I talk about that book. If you can't handle reading about abuse, that's a book that's going to be horrible for you to read. It's about abuse to a young boy, and he's the one that's writing the book. It's his story. And Pilsner is his last name. And we talk about neglect and acts of omission in that book. And I know in your household, some similar, nothing major like this happened, but similar things. The kid was made to sleep out in the garage, and he would gather up newspapers and sleep on the newspapers because sleeping on a cold concrete floor was too cold. Well, then the mother went and took the newspapers away. The mother was extremely abusive in this case until the school finally gets in. Somebody finally helps this child get out of this home. It's a horrible story. And there is a story that comes in after that I have yet to read. And then
I need to interrupt because there's a situation that she used to put the kids out in the barn to sleep. And they'd build their little hammocks and that kind of stuff. And that's total child abuse. And I don't remember, it was never in the winter, I know that. But I remember it got excessive, and really one time's excessive. That's ridiculous. It's really hard to be with a narcissist because everybody's kind of just trying to survive. And I did go out and I told Ben, at night, hey, Ben, sorry, I used the name. Can we erase that? Anyways, the back door's unlocked to the garage. We had the garage fixed up pretty nice. So he slept on the couch out there in the garage, and he had blankets and that kind of stuff. And I said, first light, you better be back out in the barn, and that's, Yeah, anyways,
So-
I'm not proud of that.
No, and
That was
so
some tough stuff.
to talk about that a little bit further, I heard that story originally from Ben. And I had just started dating him and I thought, oh my God, what have I got myself into? A man that can't take care of his children. Oh my God. We were camping and I went into the trees and cried and prayed and asked for some guidance there. And fast forward, this is not a man of abuse in any form. He just was in a position where he was threatened that all of his kids would be taken away from him. And he did not have the knowledge of the courts and the legal system. And so she made up shit
Wow.
that she was able to tell him. I can't say completely made it up, but she took and blew it out of proportion. And not knowing what it takes to divorce and get the kids. And if you know anything about divorce and keeping kids safe and whatnot, Tina Swithin, you can read her books and go to her blog, Tina Swithin. She is amazing at what she's done with the court systems in California because of her narcissist ex.
Well, she did take my kids away, all 6 of them.
Mhm.
She took them to South Dakota. One time when I was at work, I got home, the house was vacant, and there's a note. Took the kids to South Dakota. She put them in school. This was long-term stuff. She stayed in her grandmother's house. Her grandmother passed away, so it was a vacant house. But she took the kids away. So that's a very real threat.
Mhm.
She did it,
Mhm.
you know, so. And I felt like there wasn't anything I could do about it legally, and there probably wasn't. I mean, what do you do? Go to the police? Hey, my wife stole my kids.
Well, yeah, you can.
Can you?
Yes.
Wow.
That's kidnapping. So yes, and there's a big bunch. You can't just, there's not just one little tiny thing that you can do, but yes, there's things that you can do. So we're just going to kind of cover these next two together and talk about them together. We have legal abuse and biblical and spiritual abuse. And so I know that we'll talk about the biblical and spiritual abuse first, because I know that she used the Bible to force you to do what she wanted you to do.
Right. She'd read it and interpret it how she felt it fit her situation, of course, to use against you. So, and you would never add up in her eyes. So don't even bother. So that's how I look at it now. Back then, I tried my darndest to match up to what she is saying. I tried so hard for years.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I have to say this, I'm the luckiest woman on the planet. If he would stay with somebody like that for as long as he did, he deserves to be treated like a king. From a queen.
Wow,
From
there
a
you go.
queen.
I'll take it.
And then legal abuse. And you've been divorced now for just over 3 years. And she uses the court systems to control you legally,
Right.
making you spend money with a lawyer. And
Oh yeah.
so here we are at a part that he's got a heck of a lawyer. His lawyer is awesome.
The new lawyer.
Yes,
the
the
other
new
lawyer.
The new lawyer.
Bad.
So these are points that are important to get a good lawyer as you go through this, one that is suited for your case. Not all lawyers are one size fits all, and you'll hear me say that a bunch. So in this specific situation, your lawyer contacts you, hey, she hasn't paid you, let's go after her. Let's go after her. So Joe's actually come to a point where he says, no, let's not do that. Let's wait the course through this, and then we'll take care of stuff at a different time frame.
Right.
But it's wonderful when you have an attorney who actually cares about you getting what you're just. And I've read through all kinds of things, and I think some of this was through Tina Swithin's, that some of these people want to take you to court. That's their way of dating. It's called court dating. They get to see you. They love to see you squirm. They love to see all that. That's like fuel to their fire. Those are types of things they love. But in this case, you know, he's done. He's separated. He started his healing process. He is okay just moving forward. There's not anything that she could do at this point. But that connection, and we've talked often about this, that connection to the pain of what they cause you, the anger, they took money from you, whatever that looks like to you, that is holding on to that, they're still in control. The longer you hold on, the longer you give them more control over you. And the only way to let go of that control is to let go of the things that are bothering you.
Give it to God.
Yeah.
That helps, because sometimes you go down that trance of remembering. It's like, God, please take that away. So that works.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's an important thing as you move forward to get the help that you need. You know, I always tell the clients the best time to bring in a divorce coach is before you make the decision to get divorced, because one, we can help you with that decision or help you fix things. But the whole time we're working with you, we're preparing you to get all of your stuff together so that you can go through with the divorce.
Right. To be safe. You know,
to be safe.
right.
And when you're in a domestic violence situation, it's super important that you are safe and that you follow an exit plan as you go through things, because without an exit plan, and this is a sad, sad story, just this last year, and this brings me to tears. We, and not me, they weren't my direct client, but we lost one of the clients. She was involved and was trying to work to get out of this relationship. It was a boyfriend, girlfriend. They weren't married as of yet, but there was an infant. And the sad part of the story is that one night she didn't come back the next morning. The family went. My associate went. My associate was the one who found her. And my associate has had to get therapy for that specific incident. And talking, you know, I said this before, as we have this beautiful bison in the back here, and this is a Blake Parsons original. As we look at that, reminds me of the Native American culture, where they say that to heal, you must speak of things 1,000 times before you can begin the healing process. And that is huge. Getting the help you need is so very important. I can't stress that enough. So what are your final advice?
Well, a
things?
lot of stuff goes through my mind when you're talking about all this. That's for sure. Legal abuse. You mentioned that. When I was married to her and we'd have some kind of argument, she'd threaten me, well, congratulations, we've now been married this long and now you'll be paying alimony. And it's like, wow, you know, and multiple other things about legal stuff. But that's one that stands out is you get threatened a lot.
Yeah.
You know, so they're going to control you as long as you stay in that relationship. I don't know how not to be controlled and stay in that relationship, because what is there? Get out. That's the way. And no contact. There you go. Definitely no contact.
Yeah, no contact. It's a safe thing. And so part of Joe's healing, and he's thoroughly, it's funny because we film some of these and then some of these we do live. This one is one of our filmed. And so Joe is the one, hey, are we ready to film for tonight? He is thoroughly enjoying the fact that he gets to finally talk about his stuff and help people so that you don't end up in the same place that he is. And so this is an important aspect. So if you are wondering, how do I get out from here? What do I do next? You can call me. If I'm not the person that you want to work with, then I can help you find the right person. Okay. Again, my name is Tina Huggins, Huggins. And you can reach me by my email at Coach Tina Lynn, CoachTinaLynn @gmail.com. You can also go to my website, which is divorcecoachspecialist.com, and you can reach me from there. It's got a lot of my information and personal information there about my work. And Joe is here. If you actually want to talk to Joe, reach out to me and we'll get you in touch with Joe. And if you are in a domestic violent situation, obviously call 911, get help. Tell your friends and family, the people that will be there for you. Let them know that things are a little bit sideways, but definitely keep them informed as you go through things so that they can help you pick up the pieces in the end. And of course, 911, like I said, call, get help immediately. But also you can call the domestic violence hotline at 800-799-7233. That number again is 800-799-7233. And again, if you have any questions, please reach out. Both Joe and I are here, and we would love to be able to help you move forward and get to a healthier part of your life. Anything else?
No, that's it.
Well, thank you very much for joining us, and please like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you.
Good night.
You have to stop moving so that she can fix it on her side.